What's your name?
Betty Jane Bertalotto.
And what were you born as? What was your maiden name?
My name was Betty Jane Sherer, and
Yeah.
I was born on February 24th, 1931,
Where were you born?
in Lamar, Colorado.
In town or on a farm?
Well, I was born in, I think, just in a midwife's house. It wasn't a hospital.
Oh, okay. And how many brothers and sisters do you have?
There were 7 of us altogether, 5 girls and 2 boys.
And what were their names?
Albert, Irene, Ann, Lucy, John, Vera, and then me.
You were the baby.
I was the baby.
What about your parents? Tell me about them.
Yeah, my father was from Illinois, but he moved to Colorado when he was real young, and in those days they could homestead, and the government would give them some land if they stayed on it. But he didn't stay on his land. But then later on, my mother and father met, and they married. And they lived in a small town for a while, and then they moved out in the country where my grandparents had homesteaded, and they had some land. And so there was a man in the city who was able to lend them money, so they bought this land and farmed, and it wasn't very much, but that's how they made their living, was raising cows and chickens and farming.
And what were your parents' names?
My parents were Levi Clifford Sherer and Jenny Minder. Jenny Minder was her maiden name.
And did you go to school in town?
No, I went to school. I started school at 5 years old, first grade, and we walked about a mile to the school. And in those days, the dirt was blowing so bad that my sisters and brothers had to hang on to me so that they wouldn't lose me, because the dirt was blowing really bad.
Wow.
And we had to walk all that way to school.
Did you, when you got to high school, where did you go?
Well, in the town was named Lamar, Colorado, and that's where we went to high school. And I lived with my older sister, and she helped me go to school because my mother wasn't able to help me with the financial things, so my sister helped me. And so I lived with her all the 4 years of high school.
Which sister?
With Vera.
And when did you get married?
I graduated out of high school on the 27th of May, 1949, and on Sunday I got married.
Wow. And how many children did you have?
So I had 4 children. I have 1 child that died when he was born, but I have 4 children.
And who are they?
And it's Annabelle, Jim, Susan, and Kathy.
And so after you were married, where did you live?
We lived on a ranch, and my husband worked with the cattle on this ranch, but we didn't stay there very long. And after that, we moved to California, so that's where my first child was born, in California. So after that, we moved a lot of different places. So,
Where were those places, in California, or did you move back to Colorado?
yeah, we moved back to Colorado, and he went to school to. First, he was working for an ordnance depot for the government. And then later, he quit that job, and we went to El Paso, Texas, and he went to school to be a border patrolman. And then that didn't work out, and so we moved to California. He was in the Navy for another 4 years, and then we moved to Seattle, Washington.
What year did you move to Seattle?
I'm not even sure what year it was that we moved to Seattle. I guess it was the year that Kathy was born in 1963.
Okay.
She was just a baby when we moved to Seattle.
Okay. And how many years did you live in Seattle at that time?
Well, we lived in Seattle for, I don't know, about 3 years, and then I moved to Colorado. We had we were separated, and so because there was problems in the marriage, and so I moved to Colorado, and then I lived there for about 3 years. I'm not sure what year it was that I moved back to Seattle.
And so you lived in Seattle after living in Colorado?
Yes, I lived in Seattle after living in Colorado, and so then I bought a house, and my oldest daughter was married, and my son was living with some friends. He didn't live at home, and so then I just had Susan and Kathy, and I bought a house, and we lived there about 3 years, and then the Lord began to speak to me about going to Mexico as a missionary, and so I sold my house, and I had a trailer, had a car, and with a utility trailer behind it, and I packed up everything, and I gave away most of the furniture and most of the things that I had, and so I packed up and we went to Colorado, and then from Colorado, Kathy and I went to Mexico, to Matehuala, San Luis Potosi, Mexico.
What year was that?
And that was in 1976. So it's going to be 40 years next year in September.
And so you lived, so it was just you and Kathy, and how long did you live in Matehuala?
Now, we rented a house, and then we went back up to Seattle to take care of the rest of the money for the house, and then Susan was getting out of high school, so she went back with us. And so then we stayed there, and I rented a big house, and then later on the Lord spoke to me about having an orphanage, and so I began to have children and take care of children. So we lived in that house. It was on a large piece of property, and it had 4 big bedrooms, and so I lived there and had the children's home about 8 or 9 years.
And then what happened after the 9 years? What happened?
Well, we had to move, and we moved into a smaller house, and I didn't have as many children at that time. There were times in the bigger house that we had around 25 children, and sometimes there would be needs. There would be mothers who didn't have a way of taking care of their children and also working, so they'd leave the children with me, and then they could go and work. And so there were different times that I would have a lot of children, and then sometimes they would pick them up, and I didn't have as many, but I averaged around 25 children most of the time during those years having the orphanage in this area.
So they weren't really orphans, they were just, the parents just couldn't take care of them?
There were some of them orphans, but most of them were just situations where the mothers couldn't take care of them, and they had to work, and they couldn't take care of their children at the same time, so I would help them. And then they would come sometimes and take the children on the weekend, and it worked out really well. So I was able to help them so they could make a living.
And so how many years were you taking care of the children in Matehuala?
Well, I started probably in 1970. I started with not 1970. I'm sorry. It was like in 77 that I had the first children, and so we were in the same house for maybe 8 or 9 years, and then we had to move from there and move to another house. It was altogether the years that we had the children. It was probably 10 or 11 years altogether.
Why did you stop taking care of them?
And then the welfare department in that town didn't like what I was doing, and so I wasn't able to get the ministry legalized, and so they took the children to a children's home in the state of San Luis Potosi. So then I had to notify the families and let them know where their children were. So then I didn't have children for, I still stayed there in that same town, and I didn't have children, but then later on, they continued to investigate me and continued to cause me problems. So in 1990, I was arrested and taken to Mexico City to and put in prison. But there were some Christian people there, some missionaries that we knew about, and they got me a lawyer, and so I only spent about 2 months in prison. But then I was sent back to the United States. But I stayed only about 2 years in the United States and started going back to Mexico because the borders were very open at that time, and so I didn't have any problem going back. But I didn't start having a children's home again. I just started working with the children in the villages and giving them clothing and different things like that. And we started a project of giving toys at Christmas time. So as I continued to do that, there were a lot of children that were blessed by that. And then in 2003, my daughter Susan moved down to Matehuala. So at that time, I was living in the United States and making trips into Mexico because I didn't have a place to live. So we started doing the Christmas projects every year at Christmas time, and I would go to her house and we would do that. So I had some friends that were working with me, and I know that one year we kept track of the amount of children that we gave to, and it was like 3,700. Then the couple that I was working with, they went ahead and did more and giving toys and things to other children. And so one year they said that we gave to 6,000 children. And this was in different parts of Mexico. Some went to the city of Mexico City and a lot of different places. And in the villages around Matehuala, there were a lot of children. So we were able to bless a lot of children in that way.
So what are you doing? Did you always stay in Matehuala, or did you move?
Well, I came back to the United States for a while. Part of the time, after I didn't have the children's home, I moved to Reynosa, Mexico, which is across the river from the United States, and so I lived there for a time. But I had a problem with the heat and everything in Reynosa, so I moved to the United States, and I lived I bought a trailer and lived there for a while. But later on in 2005, I moved back to Mexico and was living there full time. And in 2006, I had an opportunity to go to the state of Chiapas with a pastor friend, and so I really liked it there. And so in 2007, I packed up everything and left my apartment in Matehuala, and I moved down to Palenque, Chiapas.
Where is that in the country?
And Palenque, Chiapas is in the southeast part of Mexico. It's 4 hours from Guatemala, Guatemala is in Central America. So it's more or less a tropical area with a lot of fruit trees and a lot of it's a mountainous country with a lot of trees and a very beautiful place to live. So I was there until 2012. I was there 2007 and lived there until 2012, and God spoke to me that I was to come back to Matehuala in San Luis Potosi. So I moved there, and then on the trip when I was moving my furniture, the transmission in my truck gave way, and so I was without a vehicle for that time. But then later on, I was able to get another vehicle, and I have gone back. I went back to Matehuala and stayed for 2 years, and then I moved back to Palenque, Chiapas, so that's where I live now. And it's a very, very good area, and I have an opportunity to reach children and opportunity to have Bible school there, and so God is beginning to do a work there, and I feel blessed that I can be there.
So when you come in and out of Mexico from all the way from Palenque to Texas, how do you get there, and do you come by yourself?
Yeah, I have a diesel truck, and so I drive to Matehuala because that's where Susan, my daughter, lives.
That's about halfway?
No, it's not halfway. It's like from Palenque to Matehuala, it's almost 1,000 miles. It's 900 and something. I'm not sure the exact. And then I stay. It takes me about 24 hours because I have to stay in a hotel. I can't drive all the way, so I stay in a hotel, and so then I get to Matehuala, and then it's another 8 hours to come to the United States from there.
So that's a long trip.
Yeah, it's a long trip, and but it's I usually start out at like 6 in the morning, and I have to pull over and rest a bit sometimes, but then I'm able to stop around 9 o'clock at night and get a hotel and get a good night's rest and start out again. So it works all right that way. It's mountains all the way. You can't drive anywhere in Mexico without getting into mountains. And there's one area where there's a range of mountains, and they warn you, they have signs warning you that there's fog, and so no matter whether it's day or night, there could be heavy fog up on top of the mountain, so you have to be very careful driving through there. But once I get through there, the rest of the trip is not that bad. But I enjoy the drive, and it's tiring, but I enjoy the drive.
So, at 84 years old, how long do you think you will continue driving by yourself all those miles?
Well, I have a driver's license in for another, I'm not sure, 3 or 4 years. So I'll keep driving till I have to get another driver's license, and hopefully they'll give me another one. But I'm getting my residence in Mexico, so I will probably have to have a driver's license in Mexico. So if they don't decide to give me one here, I'll still be able to drive down there because there's not any problem. But I think I'll be able to get a driver's license. I don't have trouble with my vision with glasses. They pass the test. I mean, they say it's that I'm all right. The last time that I did the test, they said, just read me a sentence, and I read it, and he said, you don't have any problem. So that's the main thing. So as long as I can pass the test, I'll get another driver's license.
So what would you say to other people that would think of doing the type of thing you're doing and giving up their life in America and going down there?
Well, I think that, first of all, you have to know that God is calling you to do it. You can't just decide to do something, and it's all right to decide to do it, but there's not going to be the blessing of God unless you know that that's where you're supposed to be. And if you know that's where you're supposed to be, and you're in the will of God, then He's going to take care of the rest. Right now, there are places in Mexico they're having problems with the drug cartels, and people think it's dangerous, but I don't have a fear because I know God sent me there. So if He sent me there, then He's going to take care of me. But if He tells me don't go, I won't go. But I know that right now, that's where I'm supposed to be. And I have peace about it.
Anything else you wanted to say?
Well, I don't get to see some of you very often, but I just want to let you know that I'm praying for you, and I'm believing God that He will touch your lives, and I know that He will do a work in you if you're willing. That's the main thing. We have to be willing to let Him do it, and so we just have to believe Him. I don't get to see some of you very often, and I have your pictures, and I do pray for you, and I'm just believing God that you're going to have lives that are profitable and that you will be blessed.
Is that everything?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.